Excuse me.
I can steal one out. It's in Aiden's room. I didn't.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I know. Thanks. He is kind of a mess and all over the place, but thank you. I'm sure his father appreciated you occupying his time.
Oh,
But
sorry. Yep, right.
Any help from anybody around was always yours are close.
6'3" and 1.5.
But look at what's great.
And boys, nonetheless.
Yes,
Like that,
they never went the same direction. They were always
was honored. I don't know what she was.
test.
Quiet. Yeah, it's so. But they're
They are. They are. And the gray hairs that they give you can always be colored. Where you get those? They don't care. I earned it.
Yeah. One freak out, went out at night. I don't
What's the rule? If it's at Mary, just leave it there. I need to sign these. That's
there about no, like
20 or 15. Boom. Exciting again.
I don't really visit my classes, but what he's interested in doing. Electrical fundamentals is the one I thought of, and there's more information on the back. I was working a lot of this. If he wants more information, I can contact the instructor. So, thank you. Great. Oh, after those. Oh, those are.
Scholarship.
Oh, I
Foundation.
see.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Get that off my list. All right, it's 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If there's a motion to declare an open meeting.
I'll make a motion to declare it an open.
Gonna,
Okay, motion by Jason, second by Hope. Roll call vote. Bobby?
Yes.
Lisa, yes. Hope?
yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Welcome to everybody. Notification of the Open Meeting Act is adhered and posted on the wall of the library. Notice of meeting posted and published as required by law. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Hope, second by JW. Hope, any discussion? No. JW? Any other discussion? Brian, do you have anything to point out? Okay. Hearing no discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on the consent agenda. Hunziker, yes. Hope?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
JW? And Bobby?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. We'll move on to our special student presentation, sophomore English.
Hello. We need a mic. You see Bobby up
Yeah.
in here. You're about to speak. Okay. I mean,
Camera.
Okay, so we took the call of a presentation, and it just happened today. We just took our field trip today where we went to Knox Cave, because I don't know. Okay, so we're going to show you some pictures and then we'll show you how it ties. This is not us. A website to show it's here. by, there's an elevator. And 30 hours, where they 3D mapped the entire tunnel. So right here, and we came down steps, and then we went way and part, which was a different color. And we were like, well, not bad. Okay, so this is the Logan took this picture. One of the cool things writings from the 18th up until 2015. Was not touching, only touch where we're allowed to touch the. Yeah. The escape. So this is Joel Green. He does the tours. We don't go every year. The reason that we go into the cave is journalism. Send a week reading texts by some of the grandfathers. And all the and then we spend stories, nights. One year I was like, oh, we could go into a poem and or a cave and read some poems. So not only do we cave, but we also in there. While do you want to talk about any? Like part of the cave where there's like steps and a band right there. What is those? Well, a guy who was in a military. Oh yeah. There's been stairs and that, and they dancing. Husker players photos, the big screen stuff. It's so cool. They also have in the bathroom that there's a big spot for picnics and real hot dogs. And there's a firefighter. They did want to climb down. They were just slide and close it in. Twice. This is one of the coolest things. We did this last time too, but this is 1912. Like, and so we went down in here and hey, go in, go down, take a left, and go outside. And so we did. Yeah, it's insane how the ups and downs. And this is super cool. Terrible photo, but I didn't take it. Because we stood in a circle, he turned off all the lights in there. Except for like, you, I guess. Oh. Somewhere from the package. I thought was, I think, I forgot he had said this. Hey, whatever you want, man, that's cool. I got it. And then he was like, we wrote a tour of the cave. So really quick, just to show that like I'm basically tied into the classroom. I'm going to tell you about what we're studying. Logan, would you like to tell them about transcendental? So, someone Captain, my captain, Kristen, right? On myself. Tomorrow, the road. It's just so wholesome. Watch Dead for Society. Always going and like finding them. It's ironic because the idea with education is self-guided what you study out and then like right now. But I think it resonates really well with whether they're cognitive. And it's already on their social media. Yeah, so we're famous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. We'll move on to public comment or correspondence. Receiving, oh, go ahead, Brian.
So we have to, as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, the biggest chunk of the ESSER dollars, one of the many boxes we have to check is we have to be able to document that we have made an effort to solicit feedback about our plan on a, I put in my notes, I see that I wrote every 2 years. I think it's for a duration of 2 years, but it's at least twice a year, every 6 months. And so the purpose of this is to provide that opportunity. And what we'd like to share.
So we'll open it up to receive input on plan for safe return to schools, if there's any public comment. Hearing none, we move on to receive input on plan for use of the ARP ESSER free funds. Okay, hearing no public comment, we will move on to other public comment. Hearing no public comment, we'll move on to committee reports, beginning with the policy committee.
So the policy committee was active, very active this past month. They met in person and had some online dialogue as well. And we're going to get to that item on the agenda. We'll probably discuss that more.
All right, we'll move to administrative reports, and we'll start with the counselor's report.
Okay, so in the spring, our college visits are really wrapping up. So the first thing that I have is just an update and feedback about our two last college visits. It was April 12th and April 14th, and those were two SEC discovery days. I gave my freshmen a choice of one, kind of gave them general programs that are offered at each campus, and they chose which one would fit them the best. They really like the small class sizes, the hands-on learning, close connections with faculty is really the main takeaways that they had from those discovery days. And then I have the 23, well, it should be 22, 23, that was my bad, college visit recap. This year we visited 14 different schools and over 90 kids went on visits this year. And then on the way back from visits, I just asked them, okay, where else would you like to go? And Wayne State came up, UNK came up. And if we're up at Wayne, we might as well go to Northeast too on the way. So they definitely have some new ideas going into next year for some new colleges that they would like to see. For Joel Cole's leadership, I meet with those groups once a week. The elementary group, they did their April PBIS pep rally. They did a really good job. It was a lot of public speaking. And I think it takes a lot of courage to get up in front of your peers and to lead a pep rally, speak in front of a microphone, in front of everybody. But they did really, really well, really worked with the team. All groups are working through the process of how do we nominate members, and Joe gave them some advice on that. The groups nominated some people. I opened it up to teachers, and we'll kind of see what common themes come back, and then we'll go from there. It was really beneficial to have Joe here on April 17th, and we just focused on what are simple ideas that we can do to end the year on a high note. On Friday, it was last Friday, our elementary groups, they were in both doors, and as the kids left, they got a little treat. So they kind of give them high fives, have a great weekend. Here's a little treat to end your week with. And they'll also be doing that on Thursday, getting little popsicles, just something nice. Middle school group is also joining in with that. So we kind of have some transition, elementary going to middle school to high school. So we're kind of all working together as one, those two groups. The high school, after we had some conversations with Joe, they decided to take a step back, actually, still keeping with their PC1 campaign, but they really want to focus on how to teach the words associated with their campaign. What do our students know about it? What do they want to know about it? What does it mean to them? And then that information will help them make some decisions going forward. So tomorrow they have it out that a survey will go out to students. They'll get the results of that survey. So I think it's good they kind of step back. And why are we doing that? Student class registration, all individual registrations are done. So our goal is students walk out the door on Friday. They will have their formal schedule for next year. And then I always take some time in the summer just to make sure credits are okay, classes are okay after those grades become finalized, because there's always those ones you need to go back. Our stuff to end the year. If you have questions or anything.
Do we have any questions for Mrs. Blecka? Thank you. Move on to the principal's report.
Okay, I got told last time that the people that were watching at home couldn't hear me very well. So try to make sure that I speak into here. Just let me know if you need anything repeated. So first of all, I'm glad Mrs. Voss came. It's always good to hear from the teachers, but it's great to hear from the students. So I really liked hearing what Logan had to say. To be honest, I was going to put in here the sophomores went to Robbers Cave as part of English, and that was going to be it. So that was much better. So other areas of focus academically now, like Mrs. Blecka mentioned, the student schedules are completed. I wanted to add a couple of things about that. We were able to add 3 new offerings, a drama class with Mrs. Bloss, intro to music, which would be a dual credit offering, and Intro to Rock, which was also a dual credit offering. And I mentioned these last time, but I just wanted to bring up that the registration numbers were really low. We know that our goal is always to offer as many things as we can for our students. Some things that logistically restrict that are the number of teachers that we have available, and then the class periods that we can offer them during the day. There are so many classes that are required for students to take, and I'm not just talking Pawnee City requirements, that when we finally did find these spots in the schedule where we could make sure that the teacher was free, and that we had the all the other information that we needed for the class. Often that was the same time of day where students that would be interested in that class have other obligations already. And really, we ran into a problem. We're trying to find that kind of that sweet spot, that middle ground. We weren't able to place them any more efficiently this year. I'm hoping that as we look at the schedule for next year, we'll be able to manipulate things a little bit to hopefully provide a little more of an opportunity for kids to take those classes. But I'm also hoping that after a year of hearing that those as an option, there will be more students that will consider them as well. So anyway, on to graduation. So all the plans are complete, and we're going to begin setting up on Thursday. Obviously, some of the staff that we rely on to set up for graduation, being Todd and April, they both have seniors this year. So our goal is to not have a chaotic Friday for them. So we think we have everything in place, and it looks like Thursday we should be able to get everything ready for graduation. So seniors will arrive at 12:30. 4 pictures, a reminder for you on the board, be there at 1:30. We'll take a picture that day as well. Then the graduation ceremony will start at 2 in the gym. So just like always, the board will meet in the cafeteria and we'll walk in together for those of you that are new members.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah,
Is there
please.
anyone who can't make it to graduation? Everyone planning the mag, I haven't asked them yet. So we'll plan on doing a more formal picture that day.
Good. Don't have to tape anybody's face to a seat or anything like that. So, yeah. Okay, on to the next section for the community system that I've referred to this year a little bit. Like I said, we started as kind of slowly rolling this out this year. Throughout the year, we calculated points that students or student groups would earn as they worked towards the behavior and the outcomes that we want to see in school. Mrs. Bloss, as the high school PBIS coordinator, did the bulk of the work with that. And when you're adding up points for all the students for multiple opportunities throughout the year, that can be a really daunting task. There's a lot of numbers in there. So it turned out in the end, the combined homerooms, the community of Mr. Farabee, Mr. Horges, and Mrs. Myers was the group that won. And so we got the kids together and let them choose where they wanted to go for their trip, and they chose Topgolf. And so they went to Topgolf last week, and the trip looked like a lot of fun. There's some videos floating around of Mrs. Myers trying to swing a golf club. So make sure you try to come across one of those. 8th grade graduation. I wanted to mention this, obviously with Cindy retiring this year. The students are going to go to World Fun with her one last time, and it will be on the last day of school. So the 8th graders will be headed to Kansas City for one last World of Fun trip with Mrs. Myers. So then this wasn't intended to be a sub point under that bullet. It was intended to be a new point. But summer school, we are in a fortunate position where the number of students needing credit recovery has declined. And so there has been no need for summer school. So we have no plans to offer formalized summer school at the middle school, high school level this year. So that was obviously a change in circumstances from the last couple of years, but I thought it's a point we're celebrating. So I wanted to bring that up. Mrs. Blecka also does a great job scheduling to make sure that if there is a student that does need a credit recovery option, that we are hopefully able to get them back in that class in person the next year, because we know that's where the most efficient learning happens. All right, on to activities. So we're almost through hosting track meets for the season. We had Pioneer Conference here on Saturday, which the meet went really, really smoothly. We were done by a little after 3:30. So that's about an hour before I thought we would be done. The timing systems working great. All the help we had was great. The kids throughout the day were great. So I mean, it was a really good day, and it ended up being a really nice day too. So that didn't hurt. Then we have one more track meet left on Wednesday. If the weather still holds out, we'll have district track here. That's one that we host in coordination with Fall City. So Fall City is the host that puts in the bid to the NSAA to host our district track meet, and they continue to choose to host it here. We collaborate then on event workers, Fall City bringing in a lot of people to help make that day run. And then we provide, at their request, we provide help in different spots, operate the stand, those kind of things too. So I think it's a great opportunity for our kids to be able to have district track at Pawnee, the track where they practice on, especially because we continue to have kids that are PRing every week and some kids that are really on the top of their game right now. So it'll be exciting to see how Wednesday goes for some of our athletes. Honors banquet we just had, and I just wanted to point out again that the Taher staff provided the meal again this year, and we put out letters to anyone in the area that was capable of catering an event that size. And again, Taher was the only one that put a bid in. There was one other that expressed an interest, but I have been really happy with the work that Taher's done both years that we've had them cater the honors banquet. It's been great. Both times they brought in an extra chef to help, and they've made sure that we had a good quality meal for the families that day. Tom Puala also chipped in this year and offered to smoke the brisket offering that we had. So he spent, I think, a day and a half of his life smoking the brisket. So, but it turned out great. The feedback informally that I've gathered from people has still been positive about the shift from 2 nights to 1 night. Time continues to be a concern. This year it was close to 2.5 hours ish. I think the mark that we all think is pretty appropriate is 2 hours. So we continue to work to try to make that mark, but at the same time, not shortchange the kids when we're trying to recognize all the hard work they've done during the year. A few miscellaneous points really quick. So Total Construction came and repaired the auditorium window. For those of you that have driven on that side of the building, you've seen that it's done. However, it looks a little different than the others. And so when they left and I went back and looked at it, I called them and asked them about it, and they had trouble with the metal frame around the window. So anyway, they agreed to come back and to repair it so that it does look like the others. I think right now are waiting for a few pieces. I talked to them again this week. They also need to come and finish the trim on the inside. So when I talked to them, they said it likely wouldn't be before the end of the school year that they would be back, but that they would be back as soon as they could. So I just stay in touch. So I'll have an update for you next time too. I won't touch much on Joe Cole's leadership, except for I just wanted to point out again that Mrs. Bleck is doing a lot of work with those students, and they've, I think, moved the needle in a really positive way. Joe's been in touch with the three of us about plans for next year, just wanting to know our thoughts. And I think we have a good plan to continue the progress we've made into next school year. And I think for all of you, you've seen this before, where you get a speaker in an organization or a school, and it might be great for a day or 2 days. And I think what's made this great is not that Joe's a wonderful speaker, but that Joe's been consistent about coming back and working with students in a consistent way, as has Lisa. So it's been a real positive thing that we're looking forward to continuing into next school year. Press box updates, which I just happened to look at last year's report and said press box update on the end. So I'm really happy to say this hopefully will be the last one. So, so many delays along the way, but really the last kind of finishing touches have been put on it. The precision sign and graphic came this week and installed the sign on the front. We're just waiting on Dave Pope to come wire it up, and so then it will be on a timer where it'll light up at night, every night. There is a sign that'll go on this side of the building that will recognize the donors that gave generously so that we could have that sign. And then the speakers are being installed now. So Todd and Rodney were actually just down there as Logan and Mrs. Bloss were up here. They were coming down for the last time today. So we are just right on the kind of the final stages of those last few pieces. Having that this year has been awesome, especially when we've got into track meet hosting. Obviously we didn't have it fully functional for football, but track's the time where there's a lot of moving pieces in and out, and it's been great to have. We've used the lower level for coaches meetings, scratch ad meetings, and hospitality for coaches, and then it's nice to have everything in one building when we're needing to communicate up and down instead of running back and forth. It makes things a little more efficient. We get obviously some really positive feedback because it is a quite substantial change from our old press box. So we get a lot of positive feedback from other schools that are coming and the way that we're caring for our facilities. So I just wanted to pass that on to you. The last thing that I wanted to talk about really briefly was just kind of an update from the tech team about the website. We met again today with Apogee. Things are going along really well. I've been really happy with the way we've been able to communicate with them about, little pieces here and there that we might want to see a little bit differently. And I feel like they've been great about, instead of trying to make our website look like every other school that uses their company, I think they've been great about listening to what we want and working with us to make sure that we can put that out there for our school and for the families. So we're scheduled right now for it to go live on Thursday, and we do believe we've got all the final kinks worked out. The last piece that we worked through today was syncing our student information system with it so that it effectively synced the contacts on a regular basis. So we knew that our messaging was going to be efficiently delivered to everyone that we wanted it to be. So with that, that's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ness. Move on to Mr. Rottinghouse's report.
Okay, so mine's pretty short. Enrollment really hasn't changed much. Some students came in, we had one or two that left. We'll talk about middle school SPED and social studies when we get to that point on the agenda, so I don't think I need to talk about it now. Talk a little bit about our elementary special education teacher situation. There is just a real shortage of teachers right now. I think it's everywhere, but there's been effectively nothing that has come in. Every couple of days I go in and update it, so ours goes to the top of the queue at the Teach in Nebraska website, which is kind of the go-to for teachers who want teaching jobs or want to look maybe for relocating. And that's a hard to fill area anyway. So I began to think, what do we do if we don't get a person staffed, a teacher that's certified in that area hired? And I've had a conversation. I want to probably avoid saying names quite yet at this point, but had a conversation with a local substitute that might be interested in doing it as a semester long thing, and then we'd advertise and see what we could get at semester. When we've had to do that in the past, I kind of think that advertising at semester get to a certain extent does give you a little bit of an advantage, because not as many schools are hiring at semester. So those kids that are graduating mid-year, which isn't as many, but you kind of, you get them maybe in interviews and get them in the building because they don't have as many options to choose from. So that's kind of the thought there. And do kind of have a plan that would be like we do have we're signed up. This would be at multiple levels, at the high school level and at the elementary level, for new teacher mentoring through a grant that was put out by the Department of Ed for special education teachers. So we do have an opportunity for that person, whoever it would be, to get some of the mentoring they need. I've talked to Ellen Stokerbrand, who's our SPED coordinator at the service unit. She'll work with us and help us with what we need. Have some other ideas in place. I've had some conversations about how to if we got someone out of endorsement who's not done a full teacher prep program, especially with special education, there's two sides of it. There's the teaching side, but then there's all the paperwork and that goes along with it as well. And that's where I think a person would really need the assistance. And so I've had those conversations, and I'm kind of assuming that that's probably the direction we'll have to go, just to get that staff, and in hopes that we can get someone at semester. Mr. Nist talked about school website, so, I won't say anything more there. And then on building and grounds and transportation, I just wanted to let you know that I did reach out to the contractors for the Ag Shop project, and custom cooling and heating thinks that any time now, maybe next few weeks, some of the stuff may start to show up. And he's been in communication with Todd about, or will be, about getting stuff unloaded if we can, and just let it sit here till they show up and start doing that install. Tanner Goes Construction thinks that the windows will be a pretty simple install, and doesn't have his summer schedule worked out, but certainly has us on it for when he does. So that's it was reassuring to know that that's moving along. At least it's being reported to be moving along right now, getting that stuff ordered and having install ready to go.
Mr. Bloss, come talk to you about any other. Okay.
Yeah. He was gonna do some looking on costs, compared to when he last. It was one of those things, I think, that of course we had a pandemic and all that. But if you don't want to push it, if there's not an interest.
Is there, did he express what other needs? There was a community member that contacted me to ask about our shop updates, and if there was any other things that needed done that weren't covered in this.
Well, certainly the doors are an eyesore. They'll need some attention. I don't know if it's paint or we just address that through Darnell Glass or whomever, but that would be a concern that comes to mind. I don't know.
I think he was thinking more of like the
Curriculum.
welding. Yeah, the welding program. We're getting new welders and we're getting new hood that maybe in that area to make it more up stuff. So
Sure. Well,
dream.
with what we're getting, it's coming with those. Don't ask me what they're called, but the 5-in-1 welder that can do the multiple welds and the high efficient. They don't draw near the electrical load as say 30, 40 years ago, when maybe some of the equipment we have is older, and so it's more efficient and it won't require as that higher load of electrical being upgraded to the building.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rottinghouse. Move on to item 8, which is policy. And consider accepting the policy committee's review of and recommendations for changes to policies as presented.
I don't know, before we make a motion here, do we want to discuss a little bit?
Don't we have to have a motion to discuss?
We could, it just, if we needed to, we could amend if we need, so.
I move we accept the policy committee's review of and recommendations for changes to policies as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mary, second by Lisa. I'll open it up to Mary if she has discussion or questions. Mary, do you have any questions or comments? Any other discussion? Brian, if you want to take us through it, maybe, is that what kind of your thought was?
Sure. And please jump in at any time, any one of you three. So 2006, is the complaint procedure. We just added language that would talk about what if a complaint or response to a complaint was mailed, when would the appeal timeline begin? And we've added language to clarify that. There was a reference added to the policy we are proposing, policy 3035, chain of command. So just reference to what that policy number will be at the bottom of this policy under bad faith or serial filings. And then we made sure that the form was attached to the policy. In 2008, you recall last month we adopted, or we reviewed, I think we just reviewed 2007. So we're skipping that this month to 2008, just meetings. A late addition was to, or when we potentially had issues with maybe meeting notices not getting published, that sort of thing on a short timeline. A few years back, I think it was 2 years ago, there was I think it was LB 83 was passed. That required meeting notices to be published in the paper. We've always done that as a practice, at least for many, many years. And but it didn't have to be done. So if you needed to have a quick meeting, you could just, I think at the time it had to be posted like in 2 places. So we would count our website as one, and then we would hang it up at the post office and at the Thriftway. And so with this, if the Republican, typically you have to have it in, the Pawnee Republican, you have to have it in by Friday prior, sometimes Monday morning. And to get something published that week for a Thursday, even if the paper comes early, it's the date that it's not the date that it shows up, but the date that it's scheduled or is on the front of the cover. So you only have a 1 week opportunity. We had picked the Lincoln Journal Star as a backup paper. What I've learned in the last couple of years is that the Omaha World Herald is a little more flexible in its timeline. They don't require as much advance notice to get a notice published. So that was a late change that we really didn't have a lot of conversation in the committee level, but I like to request that we include both the Journal Star and the World Herald. I think the idea with the Journal Star is that it's probably more prevalent in the community, but we get in a situation where we need to get something published on a short timeline. We probably should have the World Herald listed as well. We checked using our policy subscription that was purchased years and years ago, checked on the language about if there was ever an emergency meeting. It made an odd reference to complete minutes. We weren't sure what exactly that meant. Turns out that neither are the attorneys. They said that's pretty much word for word from statute. So I said, go ahead and remove it. I don't think, in other words, we don't think there's any difference between the minutes for an emergency meeting than it would be for any other meeting. Section 5, just to kind of be consistent with the policy guidance. We felt like that would be more fitting in policy 2009. It really fit that. So this language is being removed from 2008, and comparable language is being proposed to policy 2009. On policy 2009, there was a typo at the top that needed to be fixed. The language in the 3rd paragraph down was old language, and what we often do is take the language. I compare word for word between what we currently have and what the most current recommended language is from the attorney subscription policy service, and this language had changed at some point over the years. So this was one of those things where the committee wasn't entirely in agreement. So maybe when I'm done here, I'll leave it to them whether they want to talk about that in that paragraph. But that's the reason for the change. It's just the language from the what was in policy at some point in the over the years. The attorneys said we want to change this language. This would just make it consistent. But that doesn't mean we can't, we can't customize it. And then they had a sample set of instructions for public that wish to speak at meetings. So that's what replaced Section 5 of 2008. And we had quite a bit of discussion here. And we ultimately decided rather than make it an addendum or have it be something that would be part of the packet, maybe every time, which we still could do, just make it part of the policy. So this was, and it effectively says the same thing as what the guidelines in Section 5 of Policy 2008 had said, just worded slightly different and gives a little more flesh to the concepts. Policy 2010, no changes there. It's just there for, it was just a review. Policy 2011, last summer, and I don't know, this policy hadn't been looked at since 2013, but at that time, what the policy is in its sample form just simply says the school board can join organizations that it specifies. It's paraphrased, but the original policy that our board adopted back in 2010 listed the Nebraska Association of School Boards and also the National School Board Association. I did a little research on this and found that the Nebraska Association of School Boards, NASB, had actually dropped out of the NSBA, the National Association, I think over some political things. Maybe they thought that the National Association, and it wasn't just Nebraska, it was a half dozen different states that dropped out. I think they thought that they were getting a little too political on some issues. So I felt like since we're looking at this policy anyway, we should probably remove that reference to be consistent with what our state is doing. So that's the only change there. On policy 3029, to be consistent with the numbering in the sample policies, we want to change that to 3028. This deals with sex offenders. And we had quite a bit of conversation about this at the committee level as well. But the sample policy includes the third paragraph, which will direct the board, gives the superintendent. First, it makes a general statement. And I learned some on this process too. I prior to communicating with the attorneys about a year ago originally, and then double checking to remind myself what I had learned, and make sure it was what I remembered I had learned. It was that the district has a little more authority than I thought of saying who can be on and off of school grounds for these sort of things under trespassing guidelines. And so this would make a general statement that the district generally doesn't want registered sex offenders on school grounds and authorizes the superintendent to notify those persons. Question 3030, or question, policy 3035. The question came up in this process. There were references in a few different policies to chain of command. And where is our chain of command policy? For whatever reason, we never adopted. I said, well, we need to do that. And so we took the policy that was the sample policy appellate 3035 3035 in the sequencing, and then we talked it through, made some removals because it made some references to things like assistant principal and assistant superintendent. It really is not applicable to us, and talked about reference to if there's issues pertaining maybe to a paraeducator or an assistant coach, we really want the communication to go through the supervising teacher or the head coach, to be consistent with practice. But otherwise, language is just being added to spell out, or the policy is being added with tweaks to the language to custom it to us, to spell out what the chain of command is for the different categories of situations that pertain to school. Policy 3039 was threat assessment response. And this policy was originally adopted back in 2017 in response to a change to state law that required schools to have a process in place. When that policy was adopted, I know I proposed going with the lone decision maker, with the superintendent has to be the lone decision maker of a threat type situation. I asked the committee to consider changing this because several heads in situations like this are better than one. And it's much better, even if we are going to have a situation like this, I want to, I as the district leader would want to have input from the committee. Ultimately, superintendent is still in charge, is the person in charge of the school system. What this does, and it's actually the recommended approach of the two options. It says that we're going to go with more of a team type approach. So we already, when we have a crisis response approach where we have our crisis team that gets together after. Unfortunately, we've had to use that far too many times over the years. We have that committee that gets together after a crisis and says, what do we need to do for the kids? What do we need to do for the adults? Those sort of things. This would kind of apply same process, different persons, or not necessarily the same group of persons. And it would be if we have a student, usually it's a student that says something that elevates that level of threat. And it involves the superintendent, as well as building principal, guidance counselor, school psychologist, and law enforcement. And as a team, then, and there is a process, which is one of the advantages we have for having a school psychologist now actually on staff, not just contracted for certain hours of certain days of the week, is that person is legally certified to go through the threat assessment process, which we've had to do at least once this school year, and make a decision about a situation. And of course, it makes reference to special education, which is usually or Section 504 plan, which deals with students with individuals with disabilities. Oftentimes those things, as I talked about last month, go hand in hand. So it would put us in a situation where certain members or all of these team members would get together then and talk about it. And the idea is you don't just have one person making a decision, but it's a team decision. You've got your guidance counselor who specializes in certain things, your school psychologist who specializes in certain things, administration, probably more closely better worded on the law side of things, and then your law enforcement who has maybe some inside information. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't think about it when we did this before, but how many on the crisis safety team would also be on that team that we just put together?
We've got a list of about 10 individuals on
So
our.
that would be all the same.
No, yeah, there again, we could, a couple of our staff members have done what's called psychological first aid. So they had training, and there's an external team that through the service unit that we can all agree to a memorandum of understanding that these participant schools, if there's ever a crisis, we will surrender one or two of our individuals so they can go in and perform that psychological first aid. preferably, or presumably because you're dealing with a situation that maybe is too personal to the people in the building. You ever gotten called out for one of those? So yeah, this would be this is more of a concentrated group of individuals that would get together and just, you don't want, kind of need to move swiftly still, but you don't want too many individuals involved necessarily, but still you're thinking about things that just an administrator might not think about. So that's effectively all it's doing, and it's making all those changes to say that it's not just one person making a decision, but you're taking the team approach. So those are the policies for this month. Policy review, one review, and then the rest are changes, and then of course 3035, which is a new policy for adoption.
So do we want to go through each policy and ask for input? Or is there one that somebody wants to start with? Has something?
I still just don't really understand the need to change the wording in our public comment one. If it already states in there that we're not required to allow the citizens to speak at each meeting, I don't really see the point of changing the wording.
And you're referring, just so everyone is on the same page, I think Hope's referring to policy 2009, third paragraph down. And I think what you would say is just not make that change at all to that paragraph.
Well, I don't have a problem with taking out. I just don't understand why we need to change it to say at least 4 times a year. If it already states that we are not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, if something would arise that we feel like we need to not have public comment, then it already states that we could.
But I think, isn't it in reference to the Open Meetings Act? Is there something that states
I don't think so. I think it's either just an arbitrary number that the attorneys have picked out, or it's based on an attorney general ruling. I don't think the attorney general has ever, all the Open Meetings Act says, as I even went back and looked, is there shall make an effort to seek input from the public, but I'm paraphrasing now, but doesn't have to be every, I don't think there's a reference to the number of times. But you're looking at me like, I really don't think so. From the webinars I've sat through over the years, I think it's just, there's either AG guidance on it, or they're reading into AG guidance, and they're just giving you a minimum threshold, and you can obviously go above. There was actually a bill in the unicameral this year that was proposed, and I did just check to see if it was going anywhere, and the word is no, but it was going to propose requiring public comment on all, not just schools, but every governing body for every meeting. And so I even checked. I says,
If that happens, we'll have to change.
yeah, we
it
would change
again.
policy, but it didn't. It hasn't gone. And if you follow the legislature at all this year, it's incredibly dysfunctional because of Senator Hunt, who has filibustered everything over her protest to transgender issues. And yeah, so the little bills like that will probably just not go anywhere until next year. And then I guess I didn't give a legislative update, but 705, they're calling it the Christmas tree bill. They've got one bill that has lumped all of these. It's kind of a pork barrel approach, although it's not funding. It's it might become a new modus operandi for the legislature, which is, it's not going to end up well. But I know we're not talking about legislature right now. I just wanted you to, and I did check, knowing that this might come up, is like, do we even need to have this conversation? And supposedly that didn't go anywhere. But every year there's one or two senators that just want to, and I think that was Erdman. Usually it's Erdman or Brewer that are just very traditionalist. They want 100% absolute transparency, and they want to dictate that. So
Any other discussion on 2009? How about 2010? (2011) 3028.
I guess my question on this one is, so Sheriff Braden just had an article in the newspaper a couple weeks ago about the way I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the city needs to have some guidance as to where sex offenders can go and not go. They need to pass some type of ordinance so that he has kind of jurisdiction in monitoring that. So then, isn't that where, shouldn't we be asking them to do that for us?
we could. So give you a little bit of the backstory on this. Since when the question was first ever brought to my attention, I just looked at my first go was to the state's website, and there's no guidance on this at all. It says, there's no restrictions on these individuals. Then not too much, it's all about a year. Okay, maybe I better make sure I'm not here. So I reached out to the attorneys. Make reasonable restrictions. You can limit them from grounds or make accommodations with how they come onto school grounds. Under your right, not one, you've got a vested interest, student safety, and two, so that it's not like you're just arbitrarily choosing people. Two, you have the right to make trespassing. It'd be, I don't know if this is a good comparison, but it'd be like if we said we have another pandemic, for example, and we said face masks, and if you couldn't do it to students, obviously, but if someone come on school grounds, you could have them removed as a trespasser for not wearing face masks. It's the same concept there, because there's a vested public interest, and you have someone who's non-compliant, and so but that only applies to school grounds that you can control. Obviously we're not law enforcement, so we can only, if we do have a violator, all we can do is report it. I suppose you can ask the person, but then if there's a need for a force removal, it's just like a court order. We don't enforce a court order, but we can follow it. And if someone violates a court order, then we would report it to law enforcement and let them enforce it. But my understanding, based on that feedback, and then I actually, the attorneys resent the same email again. It's like, remember, somehow that one got deleted. I don't ever delete emails, but that one did. And it said that a city council can set up zones around certain areas, but so that would kind of be on them. It would, we still would have the authority to restrict our own property. It would be if you have proximity that's not school property, would be something the city council would have to do.
So, is our current sheriff, are we all on the same page?
Yeah, he and I actually have a chat about this.
Because the way the article read was, we didn't have any
Yeah, well, I think he and I are on the, I don't know if that article went to the paper before he and I chatted, but I know I say the other day, it's been a little while ago,
Mhm.
but when he and I chatted, it's like, yeah, it wouldn't be, it's an issue of trespass. So he would be enforcing an issue of reported trespass, not because he's not enforcing a registered sex offender situation. He's reporting an reported trespassing situation.
So the school, so our responsibility then would be to inform
Individuals
whether they can or can't come onto the school.
or make arrangements. If they've got a reason to want to be there, say, okay, you can come, but at this time, these locations and under these conditions.
You've reached out, sound correct?
Any other questions or comments on 3028? All right, so 3035 is new, as Brian stated. It's a chain of command. Any questions on that?
I like this. I think it's very clear as to what the direction is.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it's worth noting on the back that, the policy does not supersede any individual's right to contact board members directly. However, a matter is brought directly to the board, then we have to follow that chain of command too, or encourage them to do that. It's just a really good reminder. And, we have this to direct them to what the chain of command is. And their addresses are all on there for how they can contact staff. So that's good. Any other questions or comments on 3035?
We don't need to change anything, Mike, since Mr. Ness is our athletic director, correct? And
Yeah.
he is the building principal. Keep those at 2, even though he hasn't.
Well, the situation there was a few years ago, I think the teachers thought we were going to make long story short, the teachers requested through the negotiation process that we make an AD stipend in our negotiating agreement. So we have that. I think it's 12 or 15% of base, something like that. So the possibility does exist that we could have an AD that's not the building principal. Just like the possibility does exist, you could have an elementary principal that's not the superintendent. That's ultimately a board's superintendent staffing decision. But when that person's the same person, you just cross off those lines at the same time.
We can move on to 3039, threat assessment and response. Any questions or comment? Okay. I think that takes us through all of them.
You missed the first.
Did I? Oh,
when you
yeah.
Started it.
Sorry. I saw that. And didn't look. 2000, sorry, going back to the beginning, 2006 complaint procedures. Okay, no questions on that. 2008. So Brian, I did have a question or something just to add as a side note. If it does happen that for some reason we submit it, it doesn't get published, and we've missed these other dates, is there a way to still post that publicly at the library, at the grocery store? Or is that just, I mean, if this would happen again, I don't know, it could be in policy.
Oh, does it not make a reference to that anymore?
I don't
It used
Does
to,
it?
but when this changed, they just took that out because I think they said, I think the statute used to say shall be posted in at
It
least.
says posting in 3 prominent places
Okay.
within the school district.
So you still are doing that?
Only when it doesn't go in the paper.
Okay, all right, it's already in there.
And-
Okay,
If it goes in the Pawnee Republican, no, we wouldn't. If it went in one of the other two, as a practice, we've been putting it in,
awesome.
it always goes
Okay.
on the website and
So that's one place, and then,
the paper and then the physical book.
all right, any other questions?
On 2009, would we have to put it at least, like, would it have to say at least 4 meetings? Or at least 4 times per year?
To answer your question, I don't think it has to be there. No.
So to,
I
Like-
just don't like it because I feel like it's basically telling the public that we aren't gonna allow public comment. Is why I don't like that wording. And I don't feel like, I mean, I realize that there might be some future instances that we might feel we need to, but I just don't feel it's a good practice to get into. And I feel like it tells them, we're gonna limit you. I don't know, I don't like the wording of it.
but currently the policy,
So I don't think it makes a reference to the number of times.
it does not, but it does not say that
It
we
says,
have to allow it though, does it?
it says we're not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting.
So that's the wording that
It's
you
so
want to
it's
keep.
basically the same, to me, it's still saying kind of the same thing, that if we feel that we need to not allow it, we have that opportunity because it says it's not required. But I guess I just don't understand the reasoning to put it.
Like I said, I just copied and pasted this. I didn't even.
But I think people need to know that, I mean, if they think that they can always come talk, I mean, I think we should have it on policy that, hey, we don't have to have public comments because we've got a lot of business that we need to get done.
But it's
I'm thinking
saying
so.
that by saying it's not required to allow.
So you just want to say the board is not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting and then end it there.
So, but technically then if we wanted to, we could say no public comment, no public comment, no public comment. I feel like it's protecting public comment that we have to do it at least 4 times, not, because
That's
to me,
what I-
it's a step up from what is not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting. I guess in my mind, that's how I am reading that, but that may not be what everyone else feels. To me, it's protecting the public that a board would have to have public comment at least 4 times, but it's not saying we're only going to give you 4 times a year to speak. That's how I'm reading it. If that's not how it would be taken by somebody just reading our policy, to me, it's a step up from not requiring. I'm not stuck on it, but I feel like it's sort of a mandate of public knowledge that at least 4 times per year that we can't get a board in here that isn't ever going to have public comment.
Yeah, I think, I guess when I first read it, I looked at it as we were trying to limit. And that's how I read it.
So-
Only, but even though it does say at least, I guess I don't want
to read it and be like, oh, they're only gonna do it 4 times a year.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know how. Stress the at least 4 times instead of only 4 times.
Do we need to change the word from at least to at minimum?
The
It's the
same,
same
it's
thing,
the
but I don't know.
Maybe we just need to keep the at least out of, I mean, if you're gonna allow it 4 times a year, why can't you just say that they'll be allowed to speak 4 times a year?
Then
But-
I would
But then
I would
I-
go like, well, I get 4 times a year
Yeah.
to speak and that's it.
I
I
know,
know,
at
and
a
and
12
that's
month.
where I'm saying, I think people are gonna read it different no matter what.
No less. I don't know how.
unless you break up the sentence and say, the board is not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting. The board will provide the opportunity for public participation at least 4 times in a year. I mean, you're saying the exact same thing. It's just breaking it up and hopefully people comprehend it a little bit better.
How would we change it?
Well, we don't want it to sound limiting or
The misinterpretation that we're limiting it to 4.
so how would you say that then? The board is not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but will provide opportunity at some meetings.
I would say.
Just
Attorneys being attorneys, I think they feel like, yeah, they're not, but they're not English, they're not literary. They are technical.
I mean, it's just.
Yes.
That's why I
I
thought you
agree
should just leave it with at the end of not required to allow, but that we can.
So
Is it protecting? Is there anywhere else where it is stated
Let me look to see what the Open Meetings Act says.
Could we put something about discretion at our discretion due to business?
I'm okay with taking it out. I'm just trying to figure out why attorney
wanted in there? And I think it is.
that.
In there that we have.
yeah.
And I get that. I just, like I said, I think people are gonna read it, but we're trying to limit them. I think we're gonna have people that are gonna read it both ways.
Regardless of how you, somebody's always gonna misinterpret it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's gonna be unforeseen circumstances that we don't know, but like, could we put in public comments may not be allowed due to business or like, for example, but I don't wanna
You don't want
throw us
to.
under the, I don't wanna say that. And then something else come up that we didn't mention and we'd be like, well, we can't have public comment tonight because of this. And then somebody come back and say, well, that's not in the policy. It says that the only reason to allow public comment would be because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. What if we switched it around and had that we would allow the opportunity for public participation at least 4 times a year, but we are not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting?
I feel like they're the same. If somebody's gonna read it wrong, they're gonna read it.
Mhm.
Person.
Right. It would be nice if we could just take out the number part and
But I see why you're wanting it in there too. I see it both
Right.
ways.
You could do that. You could make a parenthetical. Laura's giving me the don't do that look. It's like, don't be a social studies teacher and have 7 sentences within a 1 sentence. Yeah.
Done to an eye or change a word.
This is what this is what the open meetings. I'm not answering your question. I'm saying, I'm answering the question that was asked a while ago. I'm reading the right. It shall not be a violation of subsection of this section of for any public body to make and enforce reasonable rules and regulations regarding the conduct of persons attending, speaking at, videotaping, televising, photographing, broadcasting, or recording its meeting, including meetings held by virtual conference. A body may not, okay, this is the sentence. A body may not be required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but it may not forbid public participation at all meetings.
what if we put that?
I think the only reason the attorneys changed it is because they wanted to give us something concrete. But that is what the statute says. The board may not be required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but it may not forbid public participation at all meetings. There may be some AG guidance, but I don't think that, based on my recollection of the various times that this policy has been reviewed, is I don't think there's a hard, fast number from court precedent or AG ruling. And I think it would be wise just to make a decision now rather than circle back to this policy in the future. Have to.
I think the part that's crossed out should stay crossed out.
I agree.
It's kind of confusing and let her run on.
Well, and it kind of almost repeats itself.
Yeah.
And again, at the bottom of the paragraph.
if you wanted to change it, what I would recommend is just making a note. And since we're recorded, I think that would be, and then we would, I don't know if we'd have to word it this way in the minutes, but just that you would replace the first sentence of paragraph 3 of policy 2009 to state the board may not be required, is not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but it may not forbid public participation at all meetings.
Do you want a motion to amend? Do you want a motion to amend? So I make a motion to amend policy 2009 with wording board. It's not required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but may not forbid the public, participation. Keep everything else the same.
Second.
Yes.
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 Yes. Since this is listed as a discussion item, I don't think we necessarily need a motion unless after discussion, there's the desire for a motion. So I've included in the packet what we have. I don't think we need to make a decision tonight. Mr. Niss, would you want to come to the mic for this one too? But I do think that we needed to at least discuss it again and probably shoot for June to make a decision next month. Would you agree, Mr. Niss? Yeah. So I know there's things we know and things we don't know. So kind of, and if there's questions, so if everyone turns to the packet for this page, this was a spreadsheet I put together based on the feedback I'd gotten from Derek, Mr. Niss, and from Shane. So, just going down the left side for wrestling to remain co-op with HTRS, just kind of reminder of where we're sitting there. In all likelihood, we would remain it as a Class C school. Our team name, would stay. Often it doesn't bother me, but I'm sure to the person who is really involved, it might, be a little bit of a thing that sometimes the PC does get dropped off and sports and it just says HTRS or Titans or what have you. I don't think we know. I think it's safe to assume the assistant coach wouldn't change or would be involved next year. Shane has said, I think he said it in a meeting, that he really doesn't want to coach unless it's Pawnee City standalone. So he wouldn't be the head coach. Practice location remains at HTRS. I don't think there's not been any discussion that that HTRS is going to split up, is going to have boys and girls standalone wrestling. And so, and then cost. These are guesstimates. Head coach is pretty black and white because that's a stipend, or that's a specified amount. And so just in the negotiated agreement for Pawnee City, and Mr. Niss, fill me in on any details I have wrong here, but under our cooperative agreement that was drafted many years ago, we continue to follow. Pawnee City pays for the head coach. And at one time, and it is now, for much of that time, it's been a Pawnee City employee when Mr. Fairby did it. And then now that we are the employer of Shane, during during the in between there, it was an HTRS employee, so we reimbursed them for that cost. So that's the cost there that we're paying currently. And then transportation seems like a big number, especially considering that HTRS transports kids to and from meets. However, we've got to get them over there, got to get them back every day, which is someone, you know, when Steph and I were discussing it the other day, I said, we kind of were talking about, we figure $60 a day is probably, with fuel and everything, is probably a realistic dollar amount, because we're sending them over, whether it's a meet day or whether it's a practice day. It may not be quite as much on a meet day, but we still have to get them over and get them back. So that 3,600 is a rough ballpark of what our transportation costs are there. So currently it's costing us about $7,500. Unless, is there anything you can think of that I've left off of that list, Mr. Ness? Okay. As a standalone program, we're quite certain we drop down to Class D. That's its competitiveness for our number of participation, I think, is more than anything. But Coach Maloli stressed, at least that was my takeaway. Of course, we get to be have our own identity, have our own mascot. Shane obviously wants to be the head coach. We don't know exactly who our assistant would be, but we know we need one, and we don't. We've got an idea, but I don't want to say anything in public yet at this point. In my mind, the biggest question mark about the whole thing is practice location. We've talked about this. We don't have so far any really good ideas. My best, and I know I've come a long way on this. I went from absolutely not even a chance in the cafeteria to what if we just did it till one act was over. And then after one act was over, take over and fight with the bats. So we're talking about maybe until that, maybe 4 weeks, because we might want to, for all intents and purposes, we might want to wait till they just get the risers off for that winter concert. So 3 to 4 weeks on state years, which is almost every year, for one act. And so, we're talking 4 weeks in the cafeteria, which is not good. I don't know what we do on basketball game days. It's just not good, but it is. And then after that, they move on to the stage or a building or site to be determined that we haven't to be determined. So that's kind of where we're at on location. Put you on the spot, because I know we haven't chatted about this in person. A lot of email, but not in person. Remind me what the requirements are for boys and girls wrestling to be separate in terms of coaching. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're doing it. So a possibility of girls wrestling. I think it's Title IX. If there was an interest and girls wanted to do it, I think we should at least entertain the idea of putting them separate. So estimated cost. You've got your head coach cost, assistant coach cost, transportation. $1,000 is just a shot in the dark. It truly is a guess. We wouldn't be spending as much unless we had like a huge team, because usually the coaches drive. So whether it's an hourly, say it was a para that has to be paid by the hour, we usually calculate that out to be equivalent to what their stipend would, or what their flat amount would be, but they're on the clock anyway. So if they're driving, Shane, I asked him that question specifically. He said, yeah, we continue to drive like we were before with no additional reimbursement. So aside from rent or facility, cost is $7,700, about the same. Now, if someone said, we have found that great location, they said we want to charge $3,000 a year for rent, of course that adds into the cost.
Well, and depending on where your location is at, if we'd have to go to Table Rock, then you're going to have an added transportation cost again.
I haven't talked to Table Rock for honestly, I don't like that. For that, we're already, Steph can attest to this, we are spread super thin transportation, and I don't like leaving town if we can avoid it.
If we're already going over there, why can't we just throw them on a bus? And
That's true. That's true.
Throw
We
'em
would be
together.
going over there for basketball. Yeah,
and right
good
now,
point.
right now they take a couple vans, don't they?
So like when I'm like now, since I was coaching basketball this last year, I just drove the bus over and back on those days, and I just did that. It was a volunteer coaching thing anyway, and so I did. That was just do it, Brian. On weeks that the boys go over, we do bring them over on a bus, and there is a little bit of a cost associated with that, not much, and then pick them up on a route. Yeah, so either Rodney or Todd at the end of their route, they just swing into Table Rock, pick them up. So we do have a bus going over back. Yeah. I'm just thinking
So
we have to
it's a few extra- yeah.
send another vehicle over. Yeah. Yeah. And there's plenty of room on those buses. Yeah, that would be doable. I haven't had it. The other question is I don't really know.
Would it be able to be included in our rent that we already pay them?
Or maybe even if they only have $500 or something,
Mhm.
whatever, to rent a classroom. Gotta have some.
Or the stage, do they have stuff on the
Oh,
stage?
Yeah,
The stage is
Oh,
off
okay.
limits.
Yeah.
Like that. I think I don't know if there's a cafeteria or something, but there where you walk in
Which
Up above?
up above.
that's
Yeah.
elementary.
Yeah,
Those were elementary.
but even that long hallway, would that be enough?
Depends on what they have for, people coming and going because they rent their classrooms out. So if there was an empty classroom that we could rent, we're not going to have. How many kids do we have interested? How many kids do we have interested? It's not like a house. So one mat, two.
What about the cafeteria? Cause I know they rent that out for like, just, it's a fairly good sized room.
I think it'd be big enough.
I was gonna
haven't been
say,
in
it's
there
a
since-
fairly good sized
since
room.
school closed.
I've been
Want
to a
to
few
keep them
things there.
available for rental. I mean, because I think they do for different family. I think it'd be better if we could get a classroom that we could lock our stuff
And
up and not have to roll those mats up. Those mats are not easy to roll up. When last year, when JCC rented the 4-H building, every time we had a meeting, if they forgot to roll their mats up because we had a meeting, it was awful, and it smells horrible. I mean, sorry, but it's not. You don't want it in the lunchroom. It smells horrible.
Or if we did it. Right. Are we gonna have people in there every night after they get done practicing?
Well, sweat's gonna splatter. Yeah, it's a bad idea,
No.
but it's my best bad idea that I have so far.
But they stink.
And it's a long season because junior high doesn't start until after break. that right?
How many my kids? Boys and girls.
Is that just this year or is that in past also? Mhm. Yeah.
What about the oh, that's not big enough. Oh, no. Small enough for our space to run. You're right, it was in that email. Bottom. When it's not, there's no climate. I mean, it's not, even if you put a space heater in there, it's, the heat's not gonna stay because it's steel walls and no insulation. Yeah, it's not wide, it's only 10 feet wide. It's long enough. They know, they won't let you. It'd be, oh yeah, it would definitely be, it would definitely. $45. Wow. That's huge. Well, is it still being used as a fire hall?
They moved this weekend. But the city's gonna sell it.
Well, I kind of thought that would be a good put in a bid on anyway for the school to have. Well, when it first happened, I asked one of the city council members, and they said, yeah, we're gonna sell it. But that's been a long time ago. Seems like over a year and a half. Well, that's on my to-do list from many moons ago already. So
Okay, so my question is what happens when Shane decides he doesn't want to coach anymore? Because realistically, his daughter's going to graduate in a couple of years. That's my fear. Is I don't want to sink a lot of money into this, and then we have another sport that we're just filling coach positions with people that don't know anything. That's my
But would
concern.
Mr. Farabee get back into it if his children decided to do it?
But what happens if they don't? That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. That's the part that scares
But we
me.
have that with every sport because nobody wants to coach.
Right, but
volleyball,
that's what I'm
nobody wants to
saying.
coach.
Then we're sinking a lot of money into another sport that then we just have a coach that's just filling a spot. That's, I mean, that's realistically, we have to look at it that way too. That's a big expense to take on also.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
And then not
I
have
think
kids
we
go
should
out because
go
the
out
coaches
more
don't
sports
know
with other
anything.
schools.
Because, I mean, if that happens, then is HTRS gonna take us back?
yeah, that's
I
my
mean, that's
biggest
my
reservation.
concern. That's my
is
concern,
What message
is
this is.
If this doesn't work, then are we putting ourselves in a bigger problem?
on the other hand, with adding this, would that entice? Are we putting ourselves in a better position to say to another neighboring school, hey, we also offer this to your youth?
Oh, I know. It could be a great thing. I just think realistically, we also have to look at from the other side.
Let me ask another for the first year. Yeah, that. But that is the practice now. To answer the question, as an aide, it's already so. So all the time, I think all the time. Part of the but cross country. I don't know. I think it'd be neat to host a cross country, and I've said that before, and then I've not said it ever again because I know how much work it would take, and so but I think it would be neat, but you're right. Well, I just wanted to have it on the agenda, so circle back to it in a month.
Maybe by then we'll have ideas for location.
And I will make a point to reach out to Table Rock and see what their thoughts are, and maybe have some other ideas to bring to the table. Yeah. This got, I was like, I sent Ellen's like, are you ever going to send us that contract? Well, they're doing Adobe Sign this year, and they had my email address typed in wrong. So that's why the date says March 10th, and we're not getting to it till May. But prices went up a lot this year. I don't know. It's not like they're making money on it. I'm sure it's because it reflect their increased costs, but their hourly rates there was audiology stayed about the same. Speech went up a lot, and so did SPED director. Hadn't changed in the 7 years I've been here, so that she probably reflects rate increases. It just was a few areas that took. But what are you going to do? We've got to provide these services. They're the only. Not like we can hire our full-time speech therapist, so We get good speech services, so I'm not going to complain. It just wasn't expecting that. With the way everything else going up, I shouldn't have surprised me. But yeah, there was some, and I don't have last year's, and they're just projected. But
Is our physical therapy
it's separate.
not come?
No,
through
that
this?
we get that, and it's always been that way. It's always been through the hospital or through now Rehab Visions. It was PRTS.
I
Still
knew
bills
that. I
as
just
PR.
didn't know if it was tied
No.
in with this at all.
Oh. I guess I would say too on the rates, they do have to be approved. So that's the other thing. They have to submit their rates to the Department of Education and have to be approved. So it's not like they get to just charge whatever they want. They can't. They can't make money or be. They have to run a revenue in is expense out, and two, they have to charge a rate that's approved by Department of Ed. So. It may not be the same for everyone, but it has to be approved. They have to submit it. To be approved. Mhm. Yeah, typically, if we're going to do that, that number skyrocketed. That's the big area because it's never been over 100,000 before. So it would be a conversation probably to potentially have. We've got generally have to make that decision by about January whether we're going to co-op. Yeah. No, ours stayed the same. It has been, yeah. That might change next year, but it has been. Uh, 64. I'd say 60% of it's by the speech therapist, because the way it's been is Chelsea's. The way I say that is Chelsea's. She's staying in the service shooting, but she's going to. Today was her last day actually. Going to the life skills building. I tried to convince her that we had a sped open. She said that's a lot closer to home. And so I don't know if they're going to staff that or not. But Maria's here 2 days a week. Chelsea has been, it varied from year to year, a day a week, but she was a day, sometimes twice a week, but she's been helping us out with some of the behavior stuff as well. So yeah, I don't know what they're going to do next year. They may not know at this point for sure, but and that may have been why Ellen projected those rates as high as she did, because knowing that she might have to do outfits that goes and finds people, headhunting corporation so that she might have to negotiate her rates, and she's got the cushion built in to do that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big number.
Yes.
Yes.
Should I do, second by Jada?
Don, have you read, Mr. Jacobs, he read my comments in here. He wanted to clarify that he hasn't actually registered for the class yet, because he's trying to track down his immunization record from the 1950s. But he says once he gets that spread away, he can go. You know, back then, they just imported the sugar.
So is he taking on campus classes then?
Just has rule. It's one of the Department of Ed rules that govern special education certification. Says that you have to get that provisional, which I believe is good for 3 years. You need to have 6 hours to get the provisional. Special ed is a little different because it's less of an issue about enforcement and more of an issue about eligible, which I know this is a question. What are we going to do for the elementary position? But it becomes more of an issue as where you code the expenses. So he's willing to go get that provision enforcement. The reason I still want to stick with the interim situation, except as Terry used to say, we're going to hire and fire him. The only way I know of, and I think, is to not. It has never been a good time for the principal. There's never been a discontinuation of employment. So I don't shy of him resigning in advance. I don't think there's anything in him from having tenure rights. Not that that would in itself be a bad thing. It's just that, we are understanding knowing that back every year and want to do it, especially since he's willing to go take classwork. So that's why I had a principal ask me that question. So I thought some of you trying to say it as nicely as possible, but it's not that we don't trust Don. He's, obviously he's year by year basis. We keep asking him to come back. He's wanting to come back, doing a good job. I don't have any concern. It's just liability.
It also allows you to continue looking for that position because you can't look for that position if you don't have an opening because nobody's resigned.
Right.
So
Right. In the past, science, we advertised it in August, filling it for the following year. So those conversations we could have.
Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Yes.
yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
FYI, for us, is I gave the certificate to all the students. File those. Also, okay, and I'll set up about 3 o'clock. That way